All right, Jennifer Blanchard here, author and story coach, and I'm going to talk you through the story structure cheat sheet so that you get a general idea of how story structure works in a story and how you can use it in your own stories to really keep the pace going and keep your reader hooked from beginning to end. So the very first structure moment in your story is called the hook. This is a very early hint of what's coming at your first plot point. It doesn't have to be a direct, this is what's going to happen exactly, but it's just a little hint of something antagonistic or something that's not quite right that's going on that makes us know, okay, something is going to evolve from here. And that's coming in a novel. It would be within the first 20 pages of the story. If you're talking about a movie, a lot of times the hook is the first scene or one of the first two scenes in the actual movie. And then you've got your setup. So that's everything that happens between the beginning of your story until your first plot point moment. Setup is basically getting us ready and getting us prepared for the actual story. So the real story begins at the first plot point. That's when we're introduced to the antagonistic force. We're introduced to the journey that the protagonist is going to have to go on for the remainder of the story and what's at stake. There could be a new goal of some kind. So if something, in the setup they had one goal and the first plot point happens, and a lot of times that goal gets changed in some way. So that's that moment when the story really begins. So everything leading up to that is setup. It's foreshadowing. It's getting us ready for the actual story. Now, first plot point, we're into the actual story. First plot point changes us from the setup into part two, which is the reaction. So now your protagonist is reacting to what happened at the first plot point. They may be taking actions, but the context of those actions is reaction. So they're not being proactive. They're not being successful at this point. Everything that's happening between this and the middle of the story is just reaction. And then we have a pinch point. It happens halfway between part two, and this is just a slight reminder of the antagonist. It could be something major, it could be something minor, but we just want to be reminded of the antagonist and the fact that they're still there and that they're getting stronger as the story goes on. And then we've got the midpoint. So now the midpoint is 50% of the way into the story, and it's going to be that moment that really changes the story's direction. It shifts something. So it obviously shifts from part two to part three, but it's a big moment because a lot of times it reveals a new piece of information, something vital that's going to change the story, that's going to, reveal something. So, pull the curtain back a little more for the protagonist to get some information that they can now use to move into part three, which is the attack. So this is when they're allowed to be proactive. They're allowed to take action. This is when their protagonist is really stepping up to be more heroic, to start doing things that are different than how he's been doing them previous to this. And he's actually starting to find some success. But of course, we have the antagonist still. So we get another pinch point in the middle of this part, and it reminds us, hey, there's an antagonist. And of course, the reminder is to tell us that this character is getting much stronger as the protagonist gets stronger. So, there's still the opposing force there. And then we have your second plot point, and that is the final bit of new information to come into the story. It's the final piece of the puzzle. If this is a mystery, it's the final bit of information that the character needs to now know everything, have everything that they need to resolve the story. And a lot of times, right before the second plot point, you'll have an all hope is lost moment. That's basically just that moment where you feel like, crap, this guy's going to die, or it's not going to make it out, or this is never going to work, or they're never going to solve this. And then something comes in, second plot point, to change that, to really take them from the antagonist is going to win to knowing they've got everything it takes now to defeat the antagonist and enter the resolution of the story, which is where we see that actually coming to fruition. So that is story structure in general, and I hope that gives you a good idea of how it works, and I will catch you next time.